Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. He was better in bed, she said, loud enough for her friends to hear. Their laughter cracked through the air, sharp and cruel, while she smirked, waiting for me to break. I sat there, silent, my expression unreadable. I didn't defend myself. I didn't fight back. I simply let her words hang in the air, poisoning her reputation far more than mine. Because in that moment, something shifted. Her words weren't a dagger into me. They were a mirror held up to her. Everyone at that table saw it. The smirk on her face didn't show strength. It showed desperation. It showed someone reaching for control in the cheapest way possible. I finished my drink slowly, stood up, and placed cash on the table. My silence said everything her insults couldn't. I left without a word, while her friends exchanged uneasy glances. She had expected a scene, a fight, a desperate attempt to defend myself. What she got instead was a man walking away, calm and untouchable. That night, she called me. No laughter in her voice this time. Just anger, laced with panic. She demanded to know why I walked out, why I embarrassed her in front of her friends by refusing to play along. I let her words crash against the wall of my silence. When she finally stopped, breathless and waiting, I said nothing. I ended the call. The next morning, the shift had already begun. Her friends didn't look at her the same. What she thought was a joke lingered in their minds, twisting into whispers behind her back. I heard it later from someone who was there. They thought she sounded bitter, pathetic even, announcing something so intimate just to cut me down. By the end of the week, she was no longer laughing. She was watching the way people looked at her differently now, watching how her own words had cornered her, watching how I stayed calm, moved on with my life, and refused to let her pull me into her drama. Her attempt to humiliate me had backfired. My silence had done more damage than any comeback ever could. She used to love the sound of her own voice, but now every whisper in the room made her flinch. Because she finally realized they weren't laughing with her anymore. They were laughing at her. The fallout started faster than she could contain it. What she thought was a clever jab in front of her friends turned into a stain she couldn't wash off. Within days, the whispers began circling back to her. They weren't about me. They were about her. About the kind of woman who would try to humiliate the man she was with just to score a laugh. I kept my distance. I didn't explain, didn't defend, didn't give her a chance to spin it. I went to work, to the gym, to dinners with colleagues. I lived as if her outburst never happened. And that silence was unbearable for her. By the weekend, she confronted me at home. She paced the living room, her voice sharp, accusing me of making her look bad. She said my walking out made her look foolish, that I was supposed to take the joke, supposed to brush it off in front of her friends. I sat calmly, listening without interruption. When she finally ran out of steam, I stood, grabbed my jacket, and left without a word. Her anger was loud, but my absence was louder. That night, she called again. This time her tone had shifted. Less anger, more unease. She asked if people had said anything to me, if I had heard what was being whispered. I told her nothing, because I didn't need to. She was already choking on the silence, already imagining the conversations happening behind her back. By Monday, the damage was obvious. She walked into a brunch with mutual friends and felt the shift immediately. The laughter at the table stopped a little too quickly when she sat down. The glances were sharper, the smiles thinner. She excused herself early, claiming she wasn't feeling well, but I knew the truth. She was finally tasting what humiliation felt like when it wasn't staged. At home, she tried to claw back control. She cooked, cleaned, even reached for my hand in ways she hadn't in months. But it wasn't affection, it was desperation. She wasn't trying to win me back. She was trying to fix her image, to prove to herself that she hadn't lost all control. But every time she looked at me, all she saw was the silence she couldn't break. The calm I carried reminded her that she had wounded herself, not me. She had tried to make me the punchline. Now she was the one living in the echo of her own joke. By the end of that week, the balance had completely shifted. She had built her reputation on being the confident one in the room, the woman who always had a sharp line ready, the one people leaned in to hear. But after that night, every room grew colder when she entered. The very friends she tried to impress began keeping their distance, and she could feel it. I didn't have to lift a finger. I didn't have to explain or retaliate. My silence had already become the loudest statement. People knew who I was, how I carried myself, and they compared it to the way she tried to tear me down. It was clear to everyone that her cruelty said more about her than it ever could about me. At home, her energy shifted from arrogance to nervousness. She hovered around me constantly, her voice softer, her eyes darting, waiting for me to finally snap. But I never did. I moved with quiet steadiness. Early mornings at the gym, long hours at work, evenings out with people who respected me. Each time I walked past her without reacting, she broke a little more. One night, she sat across from me at dinner and tried to laugh about it. She said I was being too serious, that it was just a joke, that her friends didn't mean anything by it. Her laugh was hollow, her smile forced. I didn't respond. I finished my meal, stood, and left the table. Her fork clattered against her plate as she realized there was no saving her dignity with excuses. By the following weekend, the whispers she once created had turned on her. Friends who once praised her confidence now called her reckless behind her back. I heard it secondhand, and I knew she did too. She came home tense, defensive, lashing out about things that didn't matter. She accused me of talking to people, of turning them against her. I stayed silent, because the truth didn't need my defense. She had done it all herself. The woman who once loved the spotlight now avoided it. She no longer raised her voice at gatherings, no longer leaned in with her sharp remarks. She kept her head down, waiting, fearing every laugh she heard might be about her. She had tried to humiliate me in public, but my silence humiliated her more. By the time another week passed, the silence between us had turned into something she couldn't outrun. She filled the house with noise, music playing in the kitchen, television blaring in the living room, constant chatter about meaningless things, but none of it reached me. Every word she spoke landed flat, because she knew I wasn't going to give her what she wanted, a reaction. Her frustration leaked out in small cracks. She dropped hints that people were treating her differently. She asked if I had noticed how quiet her friends had become, how they didn't invite her out as much. I nodded once, gave no answer, and watched the truth settle on her face. She had once wanted the spotlight, but now every whisper made her paranoid. Every laugh in a room felt directed at her. One evening, we attended a dinner with mutual friends. I stayed composed, polite, engaging without forcing myself into the center of attention. She, on the other hand, barely spoke. The same woman who once bragged loudly, who once leaned into conversations with confidence, now sat stiff and nervous, eyes darting whenever laughter erupted around the table. She thought I didn't notice, but I saw the panic every time she heard her own words echo back in her head. He was better in bed. After dinner, she pulled me aside, her voice tense, asking if people were talking about her. I met her gaze calmly, said nothing, and walked ahead. She trailed behind me like a shadow, shrinking with every step. At home, she tried to bridge the silence again. She poured wine, dimmed the lights, and sat close beside me, her voice trembling as she said she missed the way things used to be. I listened quietly, but I didn't move closer. Her hand hovered over mine, waiting for contact that never came. When she realized I wasn't reaching back, she turned her head, hiding the tears she couldn't hold in. By the end of that night, she finally understood the weight of her own words. She had tried to use humiliation as a weapon, but it had cut her deeper than it ever cut me. She was no longer the woman who could command a room. She was the one avoiding eye contact, shrinking into herself, wondering how quickly the whispers would die down, or if they ever would. And I knew then, her punishment wasn't my anger. It was my silence, echoing in every room she walked into. By the next week, she wasn't just quiet in public, she was unraveling in private. The walls of the house felt smaller to her now, every silence heavier than the last. She moved through rooms carefully, as if even the sound of her footsteps might set me off, though I never raised my voice. I didn't need to. The absence of reaction was breaking her more than anger ever could. She tried new tactics. One night, she cooked my favorite meal, something she hadn't done in years. She set the table with candles, poured me a glass of wine, and waited for me to say something. I ate slowly, thanked her politely, and left the table without lingering. The way her face fell told me everything. She had expected forgiveness, some crack in my calm exterior. But she found nothing. Her friends, once her audience, were no longer available either. I overheard her on the phone late one night, her voice shaking as she told one of them she felt like everyone was judging her. She admitted she couldn't escape the words she had said, that every laugh in a room felt like a dagger. Her friend must have given her little comfort, because when she hung up, she sat alone in the dark kitchen, staring at the floor. By the time we went to another gathering, she was visibly different. She didn't dress with the same confidence, didn't speak with her usual sharpness. When people asked her questions, she gave short answers, eyes lowered. Meanwhile, I carried myself with ease, steady and unbothered. That contrast spoke louder than anything I could have said. Afterward, she asked me quietly if I thought people respected her less. I looked at her, calm and detached, and said nothing. My silence confirmed what she already knew. She broke down then, tears streaming as she whispered that she never meant to hurt me, that it was just a joke. I let her words dissolve into the air, giving her no reaction, no comfort, no reassurance. Because the truth was undeniable. She had tried to humiliate me in public, but the humiliation didn't stick to me. It clung to her, wrapping tighter every time she walked into a room. She had spoken loudly once, convinced her voice carried power. But now, every whisper cut deeper than her words ever could. By then, her arrogance was gone. What replaced it was desperation she couldn't hide, no matter how carefully she tried. She was no longer the woman who mocked me with a smirk. She was someone glancing over her shoulder in every conversation, terrified of the laughter that might not even be about her. But I knew. She assumed it always was. At home, her efforts turned into constant attempts to win me back. She cooked more, cleaned more, hovered more. Every little gesture felt like a performance, but I didn't clap. I didn't acknowledge. I moved through my routines, calm and untouchable, while she drowned in the silence. One evening, she sat beside me on the couch, her body angled toward mine. She whispered that she was sorry, that she didn't mean what she said, that she only wanted to look strong in front of her friends. Her voice cracked, her eyes wet, as she begged me to understand. I looked at her once, then turned my attention back to the screen. No words, no reaction. Her sobs filled the room while I sat steady. By the weekend, her paranoia had spilled over. At a dinner with friends, she barely spoke, her hands trembling as she picked at her food. The group laughed at a story someone told, and I saw her freeze, her eyes darting between faces, convinced the joke was aimed at her. Her shoulders sank lower with each burst of laughter. I didn't need to say anything. Her imagination was punishing her harder than I ever could. Afterward, she confronted me in the car. She asked if I had told people about what she said. I stayed silent. She pressed harder, her voice rising, demanding answers. Still, I gave her nothing. By the time we pulled into the driveway, she was crying again, realizing that the silence surrounding her wasn't just mine, it was everyone's. That night, she whispered in bed that she wished she could take it back, that she wished she could erase the night she tried to humiliate me. I lay still, eyes closed, unmoved. She turned away, curling into herself, her sobs muffled against the pillow. She once thought her words could cut me down in public, but now, it was the whispers she couldn't escape, and my silence was the blade that cut deepest. By then, she wasn't fighting for pride anymore. She was fighting for survival. Her laughter, once so sharp and confident, had vanished. Now she avoided gatherings, afraid of being the center of attention. The woman who once raised her voice to cut me down now kept it low, as if any word might trigger more whispers. At home, the change was even clearer. She lingered near me constantly, asking small questions she already knew the answers to, just to hear my voice. I gave her little in return. My answers were short, detached, designed to remind her that I had no desire to step back into her game. Every moment of silence weighed on her like a stone she couldn't lift. One night, she broke completely. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom, her face pale, her eyes wide. She whispered that she felt like everyone was against her, that no one respected her anymore. She asked if I still loved her. I met her eyes, calm and steady, and said nothing. The quiet stretched until she broke into tears, collapsing onto the bed. The next morning, I watched her move through the kitchen like a ghost. She avoided eye contact, avoided speaking, avoided existing in the same space as me for too long. She was disappearing in front of me, undone by her own words. At a family gathering a few days later, I saw just how far she had fallen. Her cousins, her aunts, even her parents looked at her differently. The whispers had traveled, reshaped into judgments she couldn't fight. She sat stiff at the table, smiling faintly, her hands folded in her lap. Every laugh that rose in the room made her flinch, made her eyes dart nervously, convinced they were laughing about her. And maybe they were. Afterward, she confronted me in the car again. Her voice trembled as she accused me of telling them, of spreading her words to make her look bad. I didn't respond. She shouted, then cried, begging me to explain why no one looked at her the same. But my silence was more powerful than any denial. She was learning that once words are spoken, they can't be taken back. She had tried to humiliate me in public, but humiliation, once unleashed, doesn't stay where you place it. It follows you, grows louder, and becomes the only voice you hear. And now she heard it everywhere. By the time another week passed, she was unrecognizable. The fire that once burned in her voice was gone, replaced by hesitation. She avoided eye contact not just with me, but with everyone. The spotlight she once craved now felt like a noose tightening every time she stepped into a room. At home, she tried to reclaim some sense of normalcy. She asked if I wanted to watch a movie, if I wanted her to cook something different, if I wanted to sit and talk. I gave her nothing more than polite detachment. The silence was my armor, and it was stronger than any argument she could provoke. Her friends had grown distant. I could tell by the way she lingered on her phone, scrolling, waiting for messages that didn't come. When they did invite her out, the invites were quieter, the groups smaller. She came home from one of those outings visibly shaken. She didn't say what happened, but the truth was written all over her face. Whatever whispers had started weeks ago were now open conversations. Her reputation wasn't recovering, it was decaying. One night, she tried something different. She sat across from me at the kitchen table. No makeup, no armor, just her. She admitted she hated herself for what she said. She admitted she didn't know why she thought humiliating me would make her look stronger. Her voice cracked as she whispered that she wished she could take it back. I listened, silent, letting her words hang in the air like smoke. When she finished, I stood, placed my empty glass in the sink, and walked away. The sound of her sobbing filled the house. She called after me, begged me not to ignore her, but I kept walking. Because forgiveness wasn't mine to give anymore. She had burned that bridge the moment she weaponized her words in front of others. By the end of that week, she stopped talking altogether. She moved quietly through the house, waiting, hoping, desperate for me to break the silence. But I didn't, because I understood something she never did. When someone humiliates themselves, you don't need to strike back. You just step aside and let the echoes do the work. She once tried to make me the fool. Now she couldn't walk into a room without feeling like everyone was watching her. And the cruelest part? They probably were. By then, she was carrying the weight of her own words everywhere she went. At work, at family gatherings, even at the grocery store, her shoulders hunched, her eyes darted, her voice came out smaller. It wasn't me people were looking at anymore. It was her. And she knew it. At home, her desperation had shifted into pleading. She no longer tried to cook her way back into my good graces or stage romantic gestures. Now she simply begged. She would sit at the edge of the bed at night, whispering apologies into the dark, hoping I would break my silence. She'd ask if I could still love her, if I could forget what she said. I gave her nothing. My calm stillness was worse than rejection. It was finality. One evening, she followed me into the kitchen, tears streaking down her face, saying she felt like she was losing her mind. She said she couldn't handle the whispers, couldn't stand the way people looked at her. Her voice cracked as she admitted she couldn't stand the way I looked at her either, or rather, the way I didn't. I poured myself a glass of water, set it down, and walked past her without a word. Her sobs echoed down the hall. The whispers outside only grew. I didn't need to repeat her words. She had done that herself. Friends told friends, and soon everyone knew what she had said. Every gathering became a test she couldn't pass. Every conversation reminded her that humiliation doesn't disappear. It lingers, reshaping every room you enter. At one dinner, I watched her shrink into herself completely. She sat at the table, eyes low, hands trembling slightly as the conversation carried on without her. When laughter erupted, she froze. I didn't have to say anything. The panic on her face said it all. She was living in a prison of her own design. That night, she whispered that she couldn't take it anymore. She said she hated what she had become, hated the silence between us, hated the whispers she couldn't escape. She begged me to say something, anything, even if it was cruel. But I didn't. I let her sit in the quiet she once weaponized, the quiet that now devoured her. She had tried to make me small with one line in front of her friends. Instead, she had made herself invisible, and the silence was louder than she ever imagined. By the time it all reached its end, she wasn't the woman I once knew. She was a shadow of herself, pacing through the house like a prisoner, flinching at every laugh she heard in public, every whisper behind her back. She had spent so long trying to control the story, but one cruel sentence had written her downfall. I never raised my voice. I never exposed her. I never repeated what she said. I didn't need to. The silence did it for me. People remembered her words, and they carried farther than she ever expected. The more I stayed calm, the more her own cruelty stood out. One night, she finally broke completely. She stood in the kitchen, her hands shaking, tears streaking her face. She said she regretted everything, that she wished she could take back the night she humiliated me. She said she couldn't live like this anymore, that the whispers were too loud, that she couldn't escape them. I listened, quiet as ever, then set my glass on the counter and walked past her. My silence was the only answer she was going to get. From that moment, she stopped trying. The apologies, the attempts to fix things, the desperate pleas, they all faded. She understood that some things couldn't be undone, and some words couldn't be forgotten. The silence between us wasn't temporary. It was permanent. I moved on. I built my life back, stronger and steadier than before. People respected me more for how I handled it. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with calm detachment. The same silence that destroyed her had rebuilt me. And her? She lived in the echo of her own mistake. Every time she walked into a room, she carried it with her. Every conversation felt like judgment. Every laugh felt like a dagger. She had once spoken loudly, trying to make me small. But now, she couldn't stand the sound of her own voice. She had tried to humiliate me in public. But in the end, it was her pride, her image, her confidence that lay in ruins. My silence humiliated her more than any words ever could. And that silence was the final word. Drop it in the comments. Hit subscribe. This is where we talk about what doesn't get forgiven.